This okay. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to this intro to astrology. I'm happy you're here. For those of you who are in person, and for those of you who are gonna be watching us, in another time. So today, the topic that I decided to share with you is astrology. As you know, astrology is a big topic, and it's impossible to just cover it in 1 hour, but I'm gonna try to do my best to give you the basics and the fundamental items in it. And then if you are interested in learning more, I will suggest some books for you. And I may be doing a series during like the winter from January to April. So just stay tuned for that. But having said that, um, as you see on the screen, I have the symbols of astrology. And to begin with, astrology is a language. Okay, it's a different language as we have English, we have Spanish, we have astrology. And the way that astrology works is with symbols. So I tried to find a graph that will show you some of the key components in this language. Okay, and when we look at astrology as a whole, we do have our planets, which are the players. We do have the signs, which usually color what the players look like. And then what we don't see in the symbology or in this chart is we don't see the houses. Okay, those are the three big components: signs, planets, and houses. Um, to be able to draw a chart, you need to be able to have your date of birth, the place you were born, and also you should have the time you were born. The time of you were born is quite essential when you are trying to draw a chart because that time is what's gonna set your rising. Like that's the time that we see what sign is in the horizon when you were born, and that sets in motion the houses. So if you don't know the time when you were born, which sometimes happens, I have a couple of people coming and maybe they used to live in the countryside and they didn't record the time or their birth certificate doesn't have the time. um, you can still draw a chart, but your chart is going to be a static chart. So it's going to begin with the sign of Aries, which is the first sign in the zodiac, and then we'll go, around with the 12 houses. So your second house will be Taurus, your third house will be Gemini, and so on and so forth. But if you do have the time, you can put it in the system and it will give you what's your rising sign. And your rising sign is that beginning stage, and it's like your mask is, it begins with your physical appearance too. And then it will set up the houses. So for example, my rising is in Sagittarius. So my first house begins with Sagittarius, not with Aries, like in a static chart. And then I continue being like my second house is Capricorn and my third house, and so on and so forth. So definitely it's an important thing. And if you don't happen to have your time of birth, um, you still can work with it, but it's not going to be as accurate because each house in the chart shows an area in your life. So you will not really know what areas in your life the planets are playing. But still, you can have an idea of the vibration and the energy that you have. So, having said that, so far, do you have any questions? No. Okay, great. So, as I was saying, and I always tell the same story with all my students and clients, that my first astrology teacher was the one that gave me this analogy that I will share with you as of how the birth chart works. And she was telling me like the birth chart is like you're inviting everyone to a party, right? And in that party, you have all these planets that come to your party. And each of these planets are going to come dressed in a sign. Whether they like that sign or not, is, indifferent at the time, but they will come dressed with a sign, and they will be in an area in your house or in your chart that will show where they are playing. And then we will see the aspects as being the relationships between the planets. And some relationships will be good and some relationships will be bad or challenging. So definitely that's where we see the aspects. So this item that you see here is all the symbols with the signs, the planets, and some of the aspects and some important points, because the North Node and the South Node are not planets, but they are important points. So first of all, if you want to start with astrology, you should try to memorize or learn these symbols, like maybe draw them in your journal or do something with them so you can see them, because then you will go to, let me see, like this. Do you see the chart?
Yes.
Good. So this is what a chart looks like, okay? And that's why I was saying it is important to know the symbols, because the idea is to be able to read this map, okay? This is the map. When you pull your natal chart, it's the map of how the planets were when you were born. So if someone would be taking a picture of the sky, they will have this natal chart. And depending on where the planets are is what your soul story or what your, challenges and also your gifts are in this lifetime. When we look at a chart, and you can see on the screen, this person who is my mother, and she passed away, so that's why I feel like it's okay to share her chart because she's not alive. But you can pull your own chart if you go to astro.com and print it out and see, and you'll see a similar map to this one. So her ascendant is also Sagittarius. So we always begin at the left in the middle, as you can see, and then we go around counterclockwise. So this will be the first house, and the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and we have the 12 houses, okay? Each of these pieces means something. When we look at the first house, we look at the body or the incarnation. When we look at the second house, we look at our possessions, our money, our values. When we look at the third house, we look at the way we communicate and the way we think. When we look at the fourth house, that is family and roots or your foundation. The fifth house is your creativity and children. The sixth house is your work, as 8 to 5 type of work or routine. Also to show health, okay, but health in a way of like, maybe it's your own health, or maybe it's like somebody in your family has health issues and you may see them there, okay. The seventh house is the house of relationships or the partner, the one-on-one, like it's not the community, it's just the personal relationship with one person. Then the eighth house is the house of transformation, also the house of intimacy. So here is where we can see some intimacy issues. There's also sometimes the relationship with death in there, because it's originally the house of Scorpio, and that's the type of energy that Scorpio usually uses. When we look at the ninth house, this is the house of the philosophy of life or your higher education, like, going to university or doing something. Also, spirituality, it could be. Then the 10th house is career. And here, yes, we have, your vocation. As the 6th house is work, the 10th house is career. So many times when we see people, we may say, oh, they work in this, but their passion is this. So when you face those people, you may see like, oh, there's like a very distinct energy in the 6th house as what they do for a living, but their vocation is totally different. And one of the challenges, or one of the goals in life is to get to be able to live that, career, that vocation, and maybe make it your 8 to 5. The 11th house is the house of community and of groups of people. So here's where we see what type of people we connect with when we are in school, what type of people we connect in life, maybe the people that we meet at church or at work. Like it's a group, okay? It's not the one-on-one, and that's the difference between the 7th and the 11th. And the final one, house 12, this is the house of the unconscious. So here's where are all the things that we do not see. Maybe we have great dreams, we have great intuition, but usually if the person is very intuitive or they have psychic ability or ways of tapping into that field, you would see planets in the 12th house because that's the connection. So those are the houses, and that's why I was saying in the beginning, if you don't know the time you were born, you really don't know where your houses are, and that takes away a big part of like what astrology can tell you if you have the 3 elements together, the time of birth, the place, and the date. So it's important if you are able to get it. Sometimes people can guess what your rising is by your physical appearance because, like I said, the rising is usually the physical iteration or our incarnation. So people of different signs have specific traits, so you can see that. But any questions so far about this? Okay, good. So now we talk about the houses. Let's talk a little bit about the planets. Okay, here we have a couple of planets, but we begin with the first 3 most important ones, which are the sun, that you can see here. I'm trying to point with my cursor. The moon, and the rising, which is not a planet, but it's an important point. Okay, so between the 3 of them, we call them the luminaries because they illuminate the chart. When we look at the sun is our personality. It's our core. It's really who we are. In the case of my mother, you can see that she was a Capricorn because this is the sign of Capricorn. So being sun in Capricorn shows usually a person that's highly motivated, really ambitious, very structured, very linear. It's just like somebody that really has very strong values. And the values come from being in the 2nd house. So if we are starting to put all the pieces together, we will see, okay, I know what the sun is about. Then I layer it with the sign, and then where the sun is located is the main focus of the chart. So the house 2, as we said before, is the house of, money values. Many times I do talk about the 2nd house as being the house of self-esteem too, because in a way, what we value is the value we give ourselves. So if you don't value yourself enough, you may not have a lot in the 2nd house. So definitely, you have to see that. The second planet that we look is the moon, okay? And the moon, which is one of the simplest ones to identify because it is a moon symbol. So that's easy to remember. Full moon is in the 12th house in the sign of Scorpio. Okay, and Scorpio, it's a sign that has a very deep connection. It's a water sign and definitely very intuitive. But the fact that, the moon is in the 12th house usually means like the person was not very aware of it or they didn't have a lot of control over that. And the moon in a person's life is the mother or the mother figure. And I always say that because sometimes the mother is not really the one that's nurturing the person, and maybe you have a grandmother, or sometimes it's the father that stayed home and the mom went to work. So It's not really like a traditional structure. So the moon is just that person that nurtures and tends to the person. And once we grow up and we are adults, the moon becomes the way that we need to nurture ourselves, the way that we um, find that, happiness, or we feed our spirit in a way. So definitely having it in the 12th house shows like a moon that was distant, like the person didn't see it really the mother or the nurturing. It was absent. And top it off with a Scorpio, it's an energy of like sometimes a little dark if it's not used correctly. I always talk about Scorpio being a sign that has three like symbols. The first one, when it's not very evolved, is the scorpion. It's the one that stings just because it's instinct. So there is like the jealousy, the envy, the little bit of like lower emotions there. When this Scorpio person evolves a little, they become the ego. Okay, so the ego can fly and really see from above and have more perspective, be more strategic, be more on target. If the Scorpio person continues evolving and burns off the lower energy, like the jealousy and the victimhood sometimes that they may have, or the manipulation, they become the phoenix, and they rise from the ashes because they were able to burn that shadow self. The reason why Scorpio has such a dark connotation is because the ruler of Scorpio, or the planet associated with Scorpio, is Pluto. And Pluto is the god of war. Pluto is the god of death and transformation. So that's why Scorpio usually has that tendency of being very deep, very good with intimacy at time, or seeking that intimacy. But if they are not really well balanced, they have some issues with jealousy and manipulation. So that's why I'm saying like, and I know my mother's story, so I know that her mother was a little absent. And there were situations where there was jealousy between sisters. So I know a little bit of the story, so I can see how this chart correlates with that. But definitely it's something that it's hard, because when somebody has the moon on the 12th house, they usually are not able to nurture themselves as adults. So they may not really realize what their needs are. They may not realize how to make themselves feel better when they're not feeling that good. So it's a hard position to have the moon at. And like I said, if you go to astro.com, and I don't get any money out of it, but it's one of the websites that I really enjoy for printing charts. Like you can put all your information and you can draw a chart like this one. It also has like, and I think they have a chart similar to this one at the bottom, but even like written that will tell you, this planet is in this house, this planet is in this house, and some of the connections. So you don't have to be able to read the chart from the get-go, because this graph may seem really daunting at times. But you can see where they are, and you can see where the locations are for your planets. As we talk, they may resonate with you. So having said that, we talk about the sun, we talk about the moon. Now let's talk about the rising. And I talked a little bit about the rising before, but what the rising means is it is our mask. It's like the first impression that the person has when they meet you. So if we were to say two people meet, like they would be meeting rising to rising, okay, ascendant to ascendant. That's the same, different word, but same meaning. Once they get to know you, they may see the sun. They may see some of the other planets. But most of the times, if they see you first, they will see that So in this case, my mother, as I do, have the rising in Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is a sign that's like the happy-go-lucky. So it's a person that really doesn't show depression. And it's interesting because I've always heard people saying like, oh my God, you can tell me the worst news, but with a smile. And we don't know if you're okay or not, but it's like, okay, you're smiling, so you must be okay. So definitely that's one of the characteristics. It's also a sign that likes adventure, likes exploring, likes, getting out there and doing things and thinking outside the box, like, breaking the barriers. If we think about the symbol, and you can see a little bit of the symbol in here, which is the arrow, the visual of the Sagittarius is the person with the bow and arrow, shooting the arrow further away and further away and continue exploring. So that's a little bit of the energy. If we see any planets in this first house, usually there is a connotation of having, you know, situations with the body. It could be health issues, it could be like physical issues, but as you can see in my mom's chart, you see Chiron. Chiron is not a planet, it's an asteroid, but it is quite an important one, and it has got a lot of like um, reputation this past couple of years. This is the wounded healer. This is the area where there's pain, okay? And I would dare to say that there was pain in this person because she may have wanted to explore and get out, and people may have limited her, like they may have put her in the box, or due to the timeline where she was born, the period in life, the area where she was living, she was quite limited, so that may have made her feel this kind of like restriction and pain point because she couldn't do what she wanted to do. So then there's pain, but she could help other people do what she couldn't do, which is interesting because when I decided to move to this country, she was one of the main supporters of me coming out and exploring and being outside when she never like got on an airplane or anything like that. So it's interesting to see how astrology shows us the story. And sometimes we can see the story as we look back. It's hard to look and say, oh, okay, this is what's happening. But sometimes if we are able to look at some of the patterns, we can feel our energies and see what part of our chart is being impacted. So any questions so far? Okay, good. So we talked a little bit about the second house and the sun there. Let's move to the third house where she does have 3 planets. And in here we have the first planet that we see here is Mercury. And Mercury is the way we think, is the way, I would say express ourselves and think, the way we communicate. And it is in the house of communication. The sign that Mercury is under is Aquarius. And Aquarius gets along with Mercury because Aquarius thinks pretty fast. But Aquarius is a sign of the pioneer. They think outside the box. They are ahead of their time, okay? And they usually think very quick. It's like sparks of ideas that come up. So when we look at that, I can see someone that really thought very fast or had like crazy ideas at times. And that is expanded with Jupiter here, which is, if you look at the numbers, I know that they are very small, but when you look at the numbers, you see that there is about a 7, 6, like maybe a 6-degree difference. So when we have 6, some people even do 10 degrees to one side and 10 degrees with the other side. They usually say that those two planets are in conjunction, and the conjunction is like they are blended together. So the energies, like sort of like I said, blend together. So Jupiter is usually known as the great benefic, and also is like usually where it is, it expands or enhances whatever he touches, which sometimes could be positive, sometimes could be negative. In here, he is expanding Mercury, so the mental activity was quite high. It was like really fast. And for some of you who know, my mother was bipolar. She had a mental disease. So it's interesting to see this because sometimes you can see those correlations. Someone that would be running high or really thinking in a way that people couldn't understand what she was talking about. And you can see that in this connection here. The next planet that we have here is Venus. And Venus is also one of those planets that usually you're able to identify because Venus is the female sign and then you have Mars being the male sign. So those sometimes are easier to memorize than Jupiter or the Sun or some other of the planets that are not so easy. But Venus is the place where like the planet that shows our passion, our love, our romance. Venus is the goddess of love. So in here, having Venus in Aquarius shows us a very different type of connection. Shows us the person that maybe was not needing that connection, like that deep, everyday connection, which makes sense because my father was a sailor. So he wasn't at home most of the time, but she was able to allow him to be traveling and coming back and traveling and coming back. And that could have been the best connection that she had because in her way, she needed that feeling of freedom as well as, having that connection. And we will talk a little bit more when we get to the 7th house as she has another big planet that is connected with this relationship and this Aquarius. As we can see, she doesn't have anything on 4th. So that doesn't mean that nothing happened in her life in the house of family. As you can see, she had a kid, like she was married, so things were there. The part that's important to know is that even though we don't have anything there, it doesn't mean that nothing happened. When planets transit that area is where we see some of the energies expressing themselves. So this chart that you're seeing is like a static chart of how the planets were when she was born. So if we look at the chart today with the planets as where they are today, we would see a different picture. So she may have a couple of planets in the 4th house transiting and activating that house. So if you see when you pull your chart, if you see houses that are empty, don't feel bad about it. It's just like it's an area in your life that you don't really need to focus a lot on. Like the theory is that you need to focus on the areas where there's more connections and more planets. And the areas that you don't have anything is good to go. So when we move to the 5th house, this is the house of, creativity and children. And I mentioned like what you see here is called a north node. And the north node is the area in our chart that shows us our purpose in life. It shows us what we are meant to be doing. And unfortunately, I didn't print the south node, but when you have the north node, quite opposite at the other side is the south node. And the south node shows, your past experiences, where you come from, where what you've been doing before, and where you feel comfortable because you know as you have been there before. So having said that, the purpose in life being in the house of creativity or children, as you can see, and I always tell people that I do feel like I was the purpose in life for my mother. Okay, like all she wanted was to have children and she had me. So she fulfilled that purpose, you know, and the Aries energy is quite an inspiring and you know active energy. So definitely like she had to put a lot of energy, not because I was a bad kid, but kids are always, you have to put a lot of energy in kids. So definitely, you can see that. And if we were to see the South Node will be in her house of community and in the sign of Libra. So it feels like she felt really comfortable with groups of people. She felt really comfortable, like being very like charismatic and diplomatic. So I saw that as a child. But maybe when she came to like having the kid and trying to be creative, she had a hard time. So many times she gravitated to go into her community activities, her church, because she felt more comfortable there than experiencing, the purpose in life. So it's interesting to see that. So whenever you pull your chart, look where this North Node is, and you may notice that that's an area that you have a hard time with. And if you look at the opposite, it's like that feels familiar, that feels comfortable. Some people talk about the South Node also being past lives, if you believe on that. So you kind of study that. And I think Steve Forrest has a very good book about that, which is called, I think, The Past Moons or the but yeah, something with the moon. And I can try find it and send you an email. After, but it is from Stephen Forrest, and he talks about past lives and the North Node as being, your purpose. So definitely, you can check that if you are interested in that. The sixth house is the house of work as the 8 to 5. Interesting enough, my mother was a stay-home mom, so she didn't have a job. So there's nothing there, and it wasn't something that she should worry about. Actually, having Taurus there shows a little bit of like the home, and they're trying to make the home pretty. Like she always like um, having everything like really clean and organized and cooking and smelling really good and all the sensory things. So I feel like that's what she thought her job was. But she didn't have any planets there, so we will move to the seventh house. And here we have the planet of Uranus. Okay, and I talked to you about having to go back to the seventh house and the connection with Venus being the passion or the love. And Uranus is the sign of like fast change or breaking structure in a way. It's also the ruler of Aquarius. So there is that energy of like having a Venus in Aquarius and Uranus on the seventh house, which really exalts or like expands the idea of like needing a different type of relationship, a connection that was not the typical one. She wouldn't have been happy with, a 24 like everyday husband in the house in a way. So we see how that met her purpose of like, okay, I have the family, I have the husband, but it is still free flowing because he goes for a couple of months, he comes back, and I'm okay with that. Okay. When we move to the eighth house, there's nothing there. But one thing that I want to mention, there are different styles in astrology, and you will see that there's one style that's called whole houses. So you will see like, each sign has a whole house. So you will have the 12 signs and the 12 houses. In here, the one that I like using doesn't have one sign per house. It usually has two. So you can see here, like we have Sagittarius, and then we have a little bit of Capricorn. Then we have here, the second one is Capricorn. The third one is Capricorn and Aquarius. And what I wanted to show you is like when we have this in this style, the same that happens here with Cancer, what we talk about is like that sign or that house being intercepted. Okay, it's like stuck in between, you know, the sign, and the other houses have a little piece of the sign. It when we see this type of house, we talk about having a hard time experiencing the energy of that house, of that sign. So she may have had a hard time experiencing the Cancerian homey feeling, and it must have been a hard like transformation for her. The same happens with her son. Like even though she was a Capricorn, because of the other planets that she has, I feel like my father played more of the Capricorn role because he's also a Capricorn, and she played more of like the breaking the rules and the Aquarius, the thinking outside the box, the exploration, and all that. So you can see some of the patterns here, and maybe why she would have a hard time experiencing or expressing her sun or expressing that sign that, you know, that planet that is intercepted in that house. So any questions so far? Okay, good. So we move to the ninth house, and here we see Pluto. Pluto is also a sign that you may be like a planet that you may be able to recognize because it's sort of like a P in a way. And we talk about Pluto being the ruler of Scorpio and being a planet of like transformation and change. In the house of spirituality and in the sign of Leo, here we see like her way of thinking and her philosophy of life was very creative, but most of the times when she expressed that creativity, it would be demonized sometimes. So the Plutonian energy is like either people don't like you, people judge you, you find some rejection in there. So definitely it was a part where like her spirituality or her way of like philosophy of life wasn't drawn, you know, or accepted in a way. And like I said, for the time she was living and having the husband that wasn't in the house all the time, and we were in Argentina, which is a highly patriarchal country, at least more when she was young than now. We had that, like the being different, the thinking different, will be judged and, you know, like seen as, I have to be worried about this person or have some suspicion about it. So that was a little bit painful. When we look at the 10th house, which is career, in here we have Saturn. Saturn is the planet of boundaries and limitation. While Jupiter was a planet of expansion and the great benefic, Saturn is the planet of like boundaries and also the great malefic. So in the traditional astrology. So what we see here, wherever we see Saturn, we see authority and we see restriction. Okay. Saturn being in Virgo is not that unhappy because Virgo is very organized and Saturn is about structure. But what tells me is like in the area of career, there was some limitation. There was a way of like, you cannot follow your career because there's something else, like there's a boundary. And Saturn also sometimes portrays the father figure. Like we talk about the moon being the mother figure or the person that played that role. The sun is not the father figure in astrology, but Saturn is, or the person that had authority. So I would dare to say it may not be a male, it could be like the grandmother again that was strict and authoritative with this person. But you have to see the person that had some, authority over, and set the boundaries and set the limits. So in here we see someone with Virgo. So the limitations and the boundaries were on organizing, and maybe she wanted to be outside the box, and they were trying to put her in the box. Still, like I said, her career was pretty much taking care of the house and raising me. So definitely you can see that connection of like career not being the focal point, but being one that was very restricted, like she was restricted there. When we look at the 11th house, this is the house again of community, of groups of people, sometimes the churches. Here again, we notice that we have an intercepted sign, like Libra is in between, so it's stuck there in that house. And not only that, we have Mars and we have Neptune. Mars is the planet of self-assurance, the way we affirm ourselves, the way we protect and defend ourselves. Like it's the god of war. So definitely like it's a way of like really setting some boundaries with others. While Saturn is setting boundaries for us, Mars is like how we set those boundaries with others. Mars in Libra is not very happy because Libra is very diplomatic. So when it comes to setting boundaries and trying to be diplomatic, sometimes those two don't go together. So definitely must have been a hard time. And top it off, even though they are not in a conjunction, because this one is 6 degrees, this one is 17, so it's not really together. Neptune is a planet that also creates confusion. It creates like what I usually call the fog. It's a planet that rules Pisces, and it's very fluid, very dreamy, very like living in illusions. So definitely like what I would see with that Mars and that Neptune there is like this person had a very hard time knowing where she finished and where the others start and how to set boundaries and how to say no, how to say, no, this doesn't sit well with me, because she was always trying to stay, the status quo. They're trying to keep the peace. And so it is a hard placement there, because when you are in connections with people, it shows someone that maybe people pleasing or passive aggressive, but not being able to be assertive in a way. And that's comparing, Mars being in that intercepted and also in Libra with that Neptune coloring. Okay. And when we move to the 12th house, here is we talk a little bit about the unconscious. We talk about the moon there. And here is where we do see where our intuitions come. And I say that because if you happen to pull your chart and you see where your transiting planets are, or the planets as they are today in your chart, if you happen to have planets there, or if you happen to have something going on there, usually you have more dreams. Usually you have more intuitions, or things seem to be more synchronistic. As we look at where the planets are in transit, we will definitely see what areas in the chart are active, what areas we need to focus on, maybe some trigger points. As you can see in this chart, usually we have this axis, like this is the ascendant, this is the descendant, and then the midheaven and the moon coeli. So if you can see, there is that line and this line. This line, which shows bottom and top, is usually showing if there's many planets by the bottom, it's like a person, it's like a more private life. like they live more at home. Their experiences have to be internal. If the planets are more outside on the top part, that a person is more of like a public person. So in here we have a little bit of both. So it's not about public or private, but if we look at the other axis, if we look at the items that are closer to the ascendant, these ones show like working with herself, like it's self-work. This lifetime was about figuring out who she was. If the items were more on the descendant side, on the other side of the chart, then this lifetime would be more about working with others and in relationships to know her life story. So usually when we see that, it's an easy way to say like, well, I can see this person has to do more self-work, or this person is just all about being in the public eye, and that's her purpose. Or they need to work on the roots and the family and the ancestors. Like you can see things by dividing that, but in here, most of them are really on the ascendant side. So any questions or anything that has come up? I know you, Janet, you do have your chart, so, and
Yeah.
you are very aware of your chart. Do you, Jennifer? Okay, so if you don't, here, let me see. Here is the website that I was talking about, okay, the astro.com. If you go to free horoscopes, you can sign up with your email address and a password, and then you will see like you will have my Astro. And in here, you would have a way to create your chart, okay? And all of this is free. Like you only pay if you save more than 100 charts in here, but if not, everything is free and you can save up to 100 charts. So here is where you would put, you know, you can do gender if you want. You know, it's like, I know that it's very binary, but your name, your gender, an event is another way because some people chart events in their life. Like, for example, if they're about to get married, they may create a chart to see what the wedding day is going to look like and maybe pick the wedding day because the planets look better. Okay. There are some people that do that. Also, if there is like a moving, you know, moving day or some other life event, you may want to choose event. Um, if not, you put female or male, you put your date of birth, the hour. As you can see, you can leave it blank. You know, it's, you can say unknown. If you don't know it, it's better if you know it, but it will pull a chart. And then you would put, you know, the place in the world, and then let me do just like, let's do imaginary. Let's it will be true. Okay, so let's put that. They were born in New York. Let's see. Ah, there's a lot of New York in Florida. Okay, let's do Florida. So you see, once you hit continue, you would be able to pull the chart, and this one would have come all the way here. And you can either pick the chart drawing, which is a simple one, and it will just pull that. And you have, you know, the chart and you see, oh, this person has everything to do with their private life and their home. I couldn't speak it better, okay? Everything is down. Or you can pick the other one, which is the extended chart selection. And here is where it gets fun because you can pick, once you know a little bit about astrology, you can do the natal, the progressions, and the transits combined. And let's put, I like this green style because it doesn't have too many like colors and lines and all that stuff. But you will see like the chart looks a little different. now. I mean, we still have everything here, but on the outer rim of the chart, the items that are in red are the transits, and the items that are in green are the progressions. You could do transits only, you could do progressions only, but if you do combine, sometimes what it shows us is like, usually for the fast moving planets, the transits are not long enough to tell us a story. So you may have a transit of like Mercury, but it takes a couple of days, so you don't really experience it. But if you have a transit of Neptune that spends maybe 10 years in one sign, then you feel it and you know. So the idea is that you will use the slow moving planets as transits because they show you longer lessons. And then the progressions are supposed to be a theory that the planets continue evolving as you evolve. So they keep moving and they usually move just 1 degree a year. So in your lifetime, if you live 80 years, they will move 80 degrees only. They don't move that far. But as you can see, for example, this person's sun is here in Capricorn, but the progressed sun is in Aquarius. So the energy that they have today may be more like an Aquarius, but at the core they are a Capricorn. And it helps us see how we evolve. Usually the part that you see it most is with the rising sign or the ascendant, because you can see the shift of like, this person may have been very Scorpion when they were young, but now they may look more like a Sagittarius. They change their hair color, they dress differently, and you can see that in that progression of the ascendant. But that is the next, and this may be too advanced, but at least now you know how to get your chart, where to go for free, and then put your chart and see what it looks like. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, or, you know, I know that I have usually, you know, my email information and my phone number in the meetup, so you can definitely like text me or email me that. It's nice to see the charts, and this is, for me, is one of the best free programs that you can have. I don't know if you have any, Janet.
I haven't done it, no.
Okay, yeah, this is the one. I know there's some others out there, but this one is the one that I've been using since I started almost 20 years ago. And I continue using it, and I even have my charts for people in Argentina and stuff when I started. So another thing that's good, once you have your chart, it's fun to see if you can get a hold of the information of some of your family members or friends, and you can see what theirs look like and maybe where the combinations are, because then you can see like, oh, their planets fall with here, and that's why we always clash, or that's why we always have this type of connection. So so definitely, like, you can get to know a lot. And if you do not know so much of like where they were born or the time, there's still what we call the ephemeris, which are a book that shows where the planets were. Um, and usually they run for 50 or 100 years. And they look, I don't know if I have any kind of ephemeris, but let me go here. And it would show similar to here. Here is showing where the planets are. If you go, I think this program also has a free ephemeris. You can put the date they were born. Maybe, you know, like, oh, they were born, you know, September 15, 19, you know, 80. Okay, I'm gonna go look. And then you pull where the planets are at that on that day, and then you can see where they fall in your chart. Even if you don't know what their charts look like, you will see what the impact is in your chart and in your life. So you have half the story there. And those are things that you can have fun with astrology. The important thing is to become familiar, to learn the symbols, like I said, like so you can look at those charts and really be able to read it, but also to be able to use the tools. Like if you are having a hard time, if you are having some issues, you can look at your chart and say like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. These are my triggers. So what can I do to move along better, or maybe find some ways to navigate that. So any final questions or anything else? No?
Oh, that was great.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you, Karina. Very good.
I'm glad that you like it. Hopefully it helped you. I know it was a lot of information. Um, but I'll send the recording if you want to listen again, or if you know if you took notes, great. If not, you always will have the recording.
Yeah, that's great. Yes. That
Good,
was
good.
great. Thank you.
Well, thank you for
That was
joining me.
helpful.
Thanks. And if anything comes up, send me an email, send me a text, okay? And I hope to see you again. You know, next month is tarot and astrology. So if you want to come again, we will be looking at the hero's journey with the tarot and the astrology. Okay?
Great.
Good. So
Thanks,
thank you.
Karina.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.